Hi guys, welcome to this week's Terrier Talk. This week we are going to be talking about demand barking. Okay, I've had this question come in a few times now, so it was about time to answer it for you guys. Demand barking, and I guess in the case of our terriers, it's quite often demand whining, isn't it, or demand screaming? But let's just call it like vocalizing in order to try and get some sort of reaction out of us. Like I've often heard this called like action prompting. Okay, so your dog is basically telling you that they want something or they're not happy about a situation, and they're doing it using their voice. Okay, so why do we get demand barking or demand vocalizing? So as a breed type, terriers are naturally quite impatient, and they struggle with frustration, and they struggle with sort of managing their own arousal situations. If you think about what they were bred to do, they were bred to act extremely quickly at extremely high levels of arousal, and to kind of stay up there and stay in that state. So they don't do very well with sort of staying still and not getting what they want, because they're also kind of very independent thinkers. Yeah, we didn't really, unlike a kind of a herding dog or a retrieving dog where we would give them very clear directions as to what we wanted from them. That's not really how terriers work. We just kind of take them to the place that they're to do that job. And yes, of course, there's some input from us and some sort of directions given from us. But for the most part, the dog's got to do the job off their own back. They've got to find the scent, they've got to do the digging, they've got to catch the vermin or whatever it is. And they're doing all that off their own, off their own brain power, if you like. So they're naturally quite impatient to get going and to be moving things, and like, I'm making decisions here and let's go. So they're just like that as characters as a general rule. It's nice when you get a nice chilled one, but like the guys that are doing that kind of demand barking, they're the ones that, and often the ones who would have been absolutely the best working dogs. So that's kind of the main reason why we get it from our terriers. So what are we gonna do about it? Okay, the first thing is we need to look at is, are we, and this, every good dog trainer will say this, and it's the thing that you'll probably hear me repeat again and again and again and again, are we actually meeting that dog's fundamental needs? Okay, so if you've got a dog that is, managing their own excitement difficult, and they're finding, not wanting to be able to stay still and all that kind of stuff, there is a potential that is because they are constantly frustrated because they're not getting to output through their physical movement or through their kind of like mental capacity what they're looking to do. Okay, so I think a good way to talk about this now is because we've all, as humans, we've all now been through this experience with COVID, where we were told to stay inside for weeks on end. We weren't allowed access to the things that we wanted to do. We could only go outside for an hour. If you were someone who would be like a runner or a cyclist or whatever, you couldn't do that thing, or you couldn't go to your clubs, and all of the stuff that you would do to make yourself sit of an evening and chill out, you didn't have access to anymore. Okay, so a lot of us have now been through that feeling of frustration that a lot of dogs just feel on a day-to-day basis, because they're just not getting access to do the things that they want to do, and for the most part very strongly genetically driven to do. So if you've got a dog that the instant you sit down, or if you're out on a walk and you stand still because you meet somebody in the street and you want to talk to them, and they're instantly vocalizing, then the chances are that dog just isn't getting its needs met in other places. Yeah, because they just don't have the capacity to do it, and they're so desperate to do everything that they ramp right up very, very quickly. Into this vocalizing, which again is a very terrier thing. We taught them to vocalize when they found something, or to get the thing that they wanted. There's lots of barking involved in being a terrier. In a terrier's working role. Then they're not going to be able to not do that, because they're just not getting their needs met elsewhere. So that's your first thing to think about. Like, am I hitting all the tick boxes for this dog? Is it getting exercise? Is it getting outlets for its breed needs? Am I playing with them every day? All that sort of stuff. Now, that's important, and you need to make sure you're covering the bases. But it doesn't mean you can have a dog that's needs are met beautifully and they will still demand bark. Okay? So your reasons for this are partly because your terrier, again, it's a very internally rewarding behaviour. Terriers are bred to bark and to vocalise. So it's a kind of default behaviour that they will go to, and they will enjoy doing it. A lot of reactivity is based in this. They just enjoy shouting at things because it's part of what it reinforces them. I found the thing, I shout at it. Like when I teach the barn hunt. The dogs are running through their course of straw bales and they're looking for the rat. And when they get the rat, they take a lot of pleasure at barking at it, and vocalising and screaming when they're getting hold of that tube and they're making those little terrier screamy noises, and they're enjoying it because, again, we've got years and years of genetic input into these dogs where we've manipulated them to do that when they get excited, because that's what we wanted. We wanted to hear them when they found the thing that we wanted them to find. So you've now got a behaviour that not only, not necessarily, but you've probably got a dog that is not quite getting its needs met, and now they're ramping up very, very quickly when they're still and they're frustrated. And now not only are they doing something that's genetically kind of predisposed to them in terms of vocalising when they're at those high levels of arousal, they're also now getting reinforced internally by that because they're enjoying it. So they're like, I love barking at things. So it's only going to make them do it more. Okay, so you've got this, and this is the problem with a lot of behaviours with the terriers, because the thing that they're doing is an unwanted behaviour from a human point of view. Like, I don't want my dog to scream and bark at me all the time, but it is a very wanted behaviour from the dog's point of view, in the sense that it's an intrinsically rewarding behaviour. If you have, a different breed of dog that's ended up demand barking because it just happened to work for them, they're like, something happened and they barked and it got them the solution they want, they will still do it, but it's easier to stop because that's not internally rewarding. It's just something that worked for them, and if you can give them an alternative, then that's easier. So they'll take the alternative. But with the terriers, you've got that difficult behaviour is very internally rewarding. So you've got a harder job on your hands to then get rid of it. So your first point, are you meeting your terrier's needs? Your second point, they're getting internal reward out of it. Okay, so that's all great. Thanks for telling me that, Kat. That's nice to understand all that background. How do I stop it? Okay, I don't want my terrier to bark and yell at me every time I stand still or when I'm in the house of an evening. So I'm going to cover two things. One, when you're in the house and how to deal with that, and the second one being like when you're out and about. And I'm going to take the fairly obvious example of you are not giving the dog what they want, which is quite often movement, as in you've stood still or you're holding onto a toy and you didn't get it, and a couple of different ways you can go around that. Right, so if you've got a demand barking, screaming situation at home, the first thing that you're going to do, assuming you're happy that you've met your dog's needs, is that you're going to do what I call rehearse the space, or build an arousal level in a certain space. So I do not play with my dogs in the house. Okay, I just don't do it, because then they would come to expect play in the house. And then if I'm sat of an evening and I'm like, right, I'm knackered, I'm going to put Netflix on and I'm going to sit and put my feet up, and the space that I am in, my front living room, has an attachment of play to my dog, and they're like, oh, I could just pick up this toy and go and shove it in mum's face and maybe she'll play with me, right? Because I've got two very high drivey worky dogs that will do that all day long given the opportunity. Okay, so I just don't play with them in my home space. Okay, because I don't want them to have that high level association of adrenaline and fun in this space. What I want to happen when they enter the front room is I want them to go to sleep. I want them to get in their bed or jump on the sofa and just associate this room through, like what we call classical conditioning in dog training, with rest. Okay, so if you're in the house, you're chilling out. Okay, and I actually make that my entire house. If you have a dog where you can't take them outside to play, or you have a situation with your activity and you're trying to using your indoor space, or you have an issue personally with getting places, then you could designate a space in your house that is for play and stuff, and I would suggest that's what you do. Like, you have a room that isn't the room that you want to sit and chill out in, and that room may be associated with play. So it's like a dining room or something like that. Okay? Do not associate your your spaces in the house that you want to be calm with play. Okay? You should be meeting your dog's needs outside, on their walks and stuff. You shouldn't need to do it in the house. Now, if you've got a dog that's currently like sitting of an evening with a tennis ball and chucking it under the sofa in order to dig it out, this is a classic terrier one, throwing it under the sofa in order to dig it out, and then sits and whinges and whines at you to get you to dig the tennis ball out, that is a fantastic game. Okay, and you just get rid of the tennis ball, get rid of the associations in the house, and there you go. I don't have any toys out available to my dogs in the house. They don't have the opportunity to wind themselves up and play in the house. And I know people have said to me, well, that's a bit cruel. I don't feel like it is at all, because I play with them every day outside of the house. They get good long walks off the lead. They are doing barn hunt and scent work and all sorts of other stuff. They do not need access to that stuff in order to wind themselves up in the house. Like, I'm sat on my sofa right now recording this, and I've got one of them on one side of me and one of them on the other side of me, fast asleep, because that is what I want. When I'm in the house, they sit next to me and go to sleep. So you build that picture through classical conditioning. You might have to go through a little period of like cruel to be kind, in the sense you're going to have to take all that stuff away from your dog and teach them that that's no longer a thing. So if you are having that problem in the house and you're now going to have to take away all that stuff, all you're going to do is when your dog starts to demand bark at you or demand whinge at you for the thing that they now are looking for, you're going to simply take them and gently remove them away from you to a space they cannot get out of. I really like a baby gate or a separate room. If your dog won't be in a separate room without kicking off, you can put them behind a baby gate where they can still see you. So instead of that demand barking or whining or whinging at you, whatever that's going on, resulting in you then getting up and doing something, okay, which is what happens. Your dog comes up to you and they go, rah, 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 I want to do something, I'm not happy. I want you to throw my ball for me, or it's dinner time, whatever. And then you jump up and do that thing for them. You've taught them that is what they get when they do that, okay? Your dogs aren't like, they don't think behaviour in terms of good and bad. They just think, okay, I did this and it got me that, yeah? So you don't teach them that. You just go, if you start and whinge and bark at me, what you will actually get is the complete opposite of what you want, and I will take you away from this situation and I will put you on your own for 10 minutes, okay? And you just time them out, 10 minutes, and once they're calm and relaxed and chilled, they can come back into the family space, which is where they want to be, yeah? And you'll find that will work pretty quickly most of the time. So that's kind of like a couple of things that you could do when you've got problems in the house. Right, out and about is a bit trickier because it's a less controlled environment. I'm going to sort of use the example of you try and stand still, or your dog won't settle, and and they just start kicking off at you, like, come on, keep moving, etc., etc. So what I would do in this situation is I would start doing very, very short moments of standing still and settling and moving off before your dog starts to bark at you. Because what you need to remember is, every time they start barking at you to do something, and then you do something, it doesn't matter what it is, they've still won the game, right? So they've, like I've said, they've enjoyed that barking, and then they've won the game. So they've gone, great. Humans stand still to talk to their pal on the street. I don't want to stand still here. I want to get on with whatever it is I'm getting on with, sniffing the female or whatever. And I bark at them, and then they move. Perfect. I've now got control of this situation. So what we need to do is we need to move off before they bark, okay? Because once they've started barking, I think the majority of terriers will keep going for a hell of a long time. So there's this kind of idea in dog training that you just wait them out. You wait them out and you wait for them to stop, and then you move on afterwards, so that barking didn't give them any kind of reward. Problem is, when you've got a persistent little terrier that will bark for 45 minutes, which they will, some of them, that's not going to help you out, okay? In fact, if you have a dog that is very, very good at demand barking, or is very, very quick to demand bark, I would go the opposite way, okay? I'll tell you for why. So, you've stopped, they've started barking. You know for a fact that your dog will just continue to bark at you for as long as you stand there. They'll keep going for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. The longer you stay there, the more determined they become at the barking, And when you move off, because you eventually give in, right? Because you do, you stood on the street and a dog's barking at you, and you eventually give in because you're like, oh crap, I can't stand here for the next 20 minutes, or actually I'm getting really embarrassed by my barking dog now. They've then won the game, right? And they've got better at that game because they've gone, I'll keep barking because eventually she'll go. And I'll tell you now, you will not outlast your terrier. You're unlikely to outlast your terrier. So what you actually want to do is move off extremely quickly. So if you've messed it up and they've started barking, as soon as the instant they start barking, move. Okay, because what you don't want them to do is get better at barking at you. They don't want them to get more determined and more like, I'll just keep going because I don't need to stop, right? You just want to go. You want to go, balls this up, get going before the barking becomes even more internally rewarding to them, okay? So even if you think to yourself, well, I'm rewarding the barking, yes, to a certain extent, but I'd rather reward one bark than 40 minutes of barking, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. Because they won't a lot of them won't give up. They'll just keep going, and you'll just end up rewarding 40 minutes of barking. And then the next time they'll think, well, I lasted to 40 minutes. The next day they'll last to 45, and then to 50, and then to an hour, and so on and so on. Yeah. So if it goes wrong and you haven't moved off before they've started barking, as soon as they do, just get a shift on. Right, so what you're going to do, you're going to take it in different contexts, different places, like on an ordinary walk, you're going to stand still for a very short period of time and then move off. And you're going to start doing that all of the time. So I'm going to stand still for 2 seconds, and I'm going to move off. Then I'm going to do 10, then I'm going to do 20, then I'm going to do 30. Okay, however long your dog's threshold for barking is, and you do that, and you just gradually extend it around the place. What I suggest you do to start with as well is you do it in places where the environment around you is quite interesting. So that if you stop on a walk somewhere and there's some very interesting sniffs around you, you can just let them do that instead. Yeah. So you're like, oh, here's a nice place on the walk with a nice lamppost for my boy to sniff. So I shall just stand still for 10-15 seconds while he does that, and then I'll move on. Yeah. And you're going to gradually extend that time. And it can be a bit of a slow game, but that's what you're going to do. Now, the other thing, the trap that is very easy to fall into with this, and this goes with like settling in cafes and all that sort of stuff, is that what happens is you go down the road of like doing settle mat training, where you take the dog in and you pop them on a mat, and then you give them some sort of food or reward, and you basically teach them to stay put on that mat for reward. Yep. Now, that's fine. That absolutely has its place. I can do that with my dogs. I can pop them onto a place, or, like on a raised bed I tend to use at home, and I can station them and I can say, you stay there, but they stay there in a state of anticipation, okay, because that's how it's been trained. It's like, you stay there, you wait for your next cue, all right, or you wait to be given like a treat or something. And we think we're doing positive reward training. Well, we are doing positive training. We think we're being really good, and we're like, oh yeah, I'm really rewarding this dog for staying put here on this bed. But if you've got a really excitable worky terrier, all they're going to do is just anticipate getting their next reward for staying still. Yeah. So instead of just being chilled, which is what you want, they're just relaxing. What they are doing is just sitting winding themselves about getting that reward. So not only are they in a state of like higher arousal than that you want when they're on the station, they're whinging and whining because they're not getting fed. You then end up feeding them faster because you get told again by the kind of like dog training narrative, just feed them before they feed the moments of quiet, right? And that's fine, but that just then builds up even more anticipation because they're just like, oh, I'm so excited, where's my next food? And you end up just sitting there like a cash dispenser, like with someone's finger on the button, constantly feeding your dog, and all you're doing is building up all this anticipation. So you're much better just going the other way, not rewarding it in any way, shape or form. I don't use a mat, I don't use anything like that. I just stop. I stop for a very short period of time, then I move on, and I just gradually extend that, and I do exactly the same in a cafe type situation. Just take them in, sit down, stay for as long as it is until they start whinging and whining, or when they're just about to start whinging and whining, and then leave again. Because you don't want to be doing that in and out of cafes necessarily that much, in the sense that you can't just walk into a cafe, stand there and walk out, and then 10 minutes or 50 minutes, at some point you've got to sit down and become a patron. You're going to practice this staying still in all of the different places. Yeah. Right. The other thing you can do is a bit of tethering, but I think I might cover that in a different podcast. or maybe even I'll do a reel, because I'm running over on time here, and taking up a lot of your time. But that's the other thing we could look at doing potentially if you have a really big problem with this. So if this is something you are struggling with, and you're like, I really struggle with, and it is a very common terrier problem, in an ideal world, you'd really like to, like to go on a nice walk in the country with them, and then you'd like to go and sit in the cafe and have them just sit there and chill while you have a coffee and a cake. This is the kind of thing I can really help you with the plan with, just on a one-off consult, which are available on the website. So if you've just got this one little thing that you need solving, I know there's a lot of people with this as a particular one problem, book a one-off consult, and I'll put you a plan together just to solve this little problem for you. Fab. So that was a couple of ways to deal with demand barking. Like I say, if this is a problem you're struggling with, drop me a line. We'll do a one-off consult, and I'll give you a little plan to work on it. Fab. See you next week, guys.